My name is Prilla Spear. I'm one of the librarians here at Tribeca, and it is my privilege to introduce to you one of our AuthorTalk on the Hill writers. This is a writer series that Wagner Library sponsors. Today we have Christie Jones-Ray, who is an author, but she's a writer and an illustrator and of children's books, and we're really excited to have her talk about her work. When Christie was a student here, and I won't steal your thunder, she graduated with a medical assistant degree. How do you transform your life into a writer of children's books? Only God takes care of that, and I know Christie has some great things to share, so join me in welcoming Christie.
Well, I just can't tell you how honored I am to be here, truly. As I share my background story leading up to this adventure into writing and illustrating and self-publishing, I want you to know that God is able to redeem a mess. He is able. As I was writing what I wanted to say to all of you, I became aware that it needed to be more than just sharing the facts on how to write and illustrate and publish. Instead, I wanted to share how to recognize God's grace to help you understand that He uses every single piece of our complicated puzzles to create something bigger, even bigger than ourselves. Something that glorifies Him if we'll let Him. When we're in the midst of life seasons, in the midst of the process, it's hard to imagine what those pieces look like. But reflection and time spent preparing the presentation, that is when you begin to see them. So I will share some of my pieces. I had always been creative as a child. When I was 8, 9, 10 years old, I was always making something. Playing, climbing trees, playing in the creek. My baby dolls were very real to me. I made Barbie cars out of shoeboxes and filled the Barbie house pantry with tiny tin cans made from aluminum foil wrapped around the end of a pencil. You know, that middle part that holds the eraser. Really sweet tin cans. I wasn't a reader. I struggled when it came to those end of the year tests. Read a paragraph, answer the questions. Well, you might as well just shot me in the head. Or have me, translate a foreign language, something equally difficult. I was just staring and staring. By 5th grade, we moved, and I attended a new school with the most wonderful librarian, Mrs. Beasley. She had a Mrs. Beasley doll in the cradle by her counter, and I had just received, at 10 years old, I had just received a Mrs. Beasley doll, so we were fast friends. I liked her. She introduced me to the books that she knew I would love, and I did love them. The Borrowers, Stuart Little, Charlotte's Web, The Long Winter by Laura Ingalls Wilder. My book for summer is dedicated to her. Let me just read you a little. Eliza meets Ella Grace Louise, a real little girl who cared nothing about reading, and she was all about her red boots. Grammy loves to show her books at vintage sales and marketplaces with her sweet Eliza Mouse, meeting friends and even babies. Languid days of summer linger, not a breath of wind is found. Grammy, with her softest hanky, wipes her hot and glistening brow. Her pinafore of soft white cotton, pockets made from Iowa doilies, holds her dear Eliza Mousie near her hanky stitched with rosies. So that was the book, but it was dedicated to Mrs. Beasley. And I even had a picture of my Mrs. Beasley doll. Well, I was growing taller, but I wasn't growing up. I wore calico dresses and pinafores that my mother made well into junior high with Mary Jane's. As I loved the new show Little House on the Prairie, I had long hair that I wore in braids, and my family often referred to me as Laura. We had joined the Nazarene Church after my 10th grade year. I thank God for the youth group and friends who accepted me. I was able to endure high school because of them. And when it was over, I thanked God for a Nazarene college that accepted me. with an ACT score of 15. In the fall of 1979, my sister, who was a senior here, we packed up her little blue car and traveled the 700 miles from Orlando to Nashville and made our way to the Hill. I will never forget orientation into the elementary education department. Dr. Tom Rosebrow read the ever-famous excerpt from the Velveteen Rabbit about what it was to become real. I cried. That's the shocker. I wanted to be married. I wanted to have babies. Mostly I wanted to have babies. I was a hopeless romantic. Still am. I met my prince and married in December of 1980, 1 month after turning 19. That winter I changed my major to medical assisting and graduated in the spring of 1982 with my Associate of Arts degree. Lois Wolfgang had been my advisor, my mentor, my teacher, and my friend. She helped me navigate my way through applications and interviews and gave me the confidence that I was equipped with the skills necessary for work in a physician's office. I remained in that field off and on for the next 10 years, and those were my childbearing years. These were the pregnant years. In 1992, with 3 young children, the oldest having just completed 2nd grade, my middle child having graduated from kindergarten, and my youngest, a toddler, I returned to Tribeca to earn my degree in elementary education at the prompting of my mother, who said, "You won't be satisfied to just sub. You'll want it to be your classroom and your desk and your things." And she was right. So I signed up for 6 courses that first semester. 19 hours with 3 children. 19 hours. I don't know what I was thinking. The first morning, my husband delivered our oldest 2 boys to school, and I drove from our home in Pleasant View, Chief County, to my parents' home in Goodlettsville in Davidson County to drop off my toddler daughter, and then on to Tribeca in Nashville, and made my way to the Business and Science Building, sprinted up the stairs to the 4th floor and into Dr. John Chilton's 7:30 a.m. American History class, 3 minutes late. And we won't have the discussion that we had after that. What had I done? 2 weeks into the semester, I was in a total panic. At the beginning of each of my classes, my professors had a devotional time and time of prayer, and we could offer our requests. And I offered my request. I did not know how I was going to make it. In between classes, I had ducked into the computer lab here in this library somewhere. I don't know where it is now. But I thought I was tucked away and working on some project. I don't remember which one. But I remember looking up to find Ed Whittington, my advisor, pulling up a chair and sitting down beside me. He was making sure I was all right. How had he found me? We had quite a talk, and I told him I had finally taken all my syllabi and my organizer, and I had mapped out a plan. This was doable. I would make it. And I was overwhelmed that there was that depth of interest in my well-being. The professors cared enough to share my plight. He cared enough to track me down and make sure I was okay. What a profound impact that had on me. I loved my classes. I loved my professors. I loved the idea of being a teacher and having my own classroom. I loved Carol Costa's class on how to teach handwriting and cursive. I was good at it. My dad had always encouraged all of us to take pride in our handwriting. He and my mother both still have the most exceptional penmanship. I wanted to teach 3rd grade. I wanted to teach handwriting. Then I had courses with Dr. Chris Ward, how to teach reading. Oh, how I wished I had had a teacher when I was in elementary school who had had Dr. Chris Ward as a professor. It would have made a lot of difference. I loved the course she taught on how to teach math, for I finally learned how to add and subtract mixed fractions at 30. I went back to that ACT test result. I had missed every single question on that test. I also discovered that I had spatial skills. I was quite proud of that too. Summer of 1993, I walked into Sarah Chilton's children's lit class downstairs in the curriculum library. We were assigned to read 40 books in 2 weeks, from early childhood level to upper elementary level. I loved this class. I loved Miss Sarah. I loved the way she said, peruse. I couldn't recall ever hearing that word, but I quickly added it to my vocabulary. Perusal. How many times could I use that word in a conversation? I stayed up late at night after tucking 3 little ones into bed, after ball games and laundry and supper. And at the kitchen table in the wee hours of the morning, I wept as I finished the final pages of one of the chapter books. I wanted to teach kindergartners. I wanted to have all these sweet books in my classroom library. I took my own children to visit bookstores, and we bought books and we read, and I was inspired. The summer of 1994, I took one last course, even though I had walked the line at graduation. So once again, Dr. Chilton was my professor, and the course was Social Studies Seminar. We studied the architecture of the ancient buildings around Nashville. We traveled surrounding counties visiting Civil War battlefields in Chattanooga and Murfreesboro, historical churches, Civil War era plantations and homes, including 2 in Franklin, Tennessee. And we stopped in at a little bakery there called Mary D's. I had no idea that this would be another piece to the puzzle, that almost 20 years later, I would be living in Franklin in a Victorian era cottage between those 2 homes we had toured, situated on the site of the Battle of Franklin. Sitting at a table at Mary D's, having a dear friend proofread my first book. On one of the last days of the seminar, I had dropped off my 3 children at my parents' log home atop Mount Airy there in Goodlettsville and headed to Nashville. There was traffic and a detour, and I was tired and frazzled and could not figure out how I was going to get to Tribeca. To say that I am directionally challenged is an understatement. That is nowhere in my brain. So I turned the car around, made my way back up that winding drive to my mother, crying. I was going to quit. I just couldn't do it anymore. She squared my shoulders, looked me in the eye, and said, "You're going. You are this close to finishing, and you're not quitting now." She's been keeping those kids all this time. And somehow, by the grace of God, made it to the campus and to Dr. Chilton and finished the course. Well, I had not factored in that teaching kindergartners standing 5 feet 10 inches tall would be detrimental to my back. So I had to let go of my dream of a sweet little kindergarten classroom. And when I was offered the position of 5th grade math and social studies teacher, I accepted. My oldest son was in 5th grade and he wasn't so scary, so surely I would be able to do this. And I did. He even asked me, I had him in class, he said, "What should I call you?" I said, "Mom, works for me if it works for you." And he said, "Okay." So they would call me Miss Mommy, the kids. We all kind of enjoyed that first year together. So I would then move on to teaching varying subjects to 6th graders at the middle school for the next 6 years. During that time, I experienced divorce after 17 years of marriage, and then life as a single parent, and eventually remarriage. So much transition and so much stress, but I was hopeful that my life was back on track. In the fall of 2001, I was asked to take over as the life skills teacher for the middle school aged children with special needs. I was put on a waiver and allowed 3 years to work towards my endorsement, and I would have come back to Tribeca for the 3rd time, but they didn't have the special ed program anymore at the time, so we worked that out. But I developed the curriculum for my class was not one at that time. I got creative. My students were precious and needy and appreciative, so I was inspired. There was a kitchen in the classroom that needed some updating for sure. A fresh coat of paint on the old kitchen cabinets and painted and stenciled and made everything sweet. And had the table and chairs there like it was a kitchen space, so it was really sweet. We baked cupcakes and wild plum muffins, and I reviewed multiplication facts as they placed cupcake papers in the muffin tins. The spices provided aromatherapy. Stirring brownie mix became a form of occupational therapy for the student with severe cerebral palsy. Our classroom became their home away from home. I would make scrambled eggs mixed with applesauce and spoon feed the sweet child who suffered with severe autism. I played soothing music, sometimes classical, sometimes nature sounds, sometimes Mustang Sally, because that was the favorite song of the little girl who had suffered traumatic brain injury. We danced, and we sang, and we hummed as we worked. They were learning. The following year, I was encouraged to create a small business to assist with the expenses of baking, classroom supplies, and field trips. Java Express, a coffee service for the faculty and staff, was launched, and a parent of one of my students donated the bags of Bongo Java coffee beans, carafes, and even the display stand he had salvaged from a grocery store. I had hand-painted coffee cups and mugs onto white aprons. They each had a name tag. Each morning, the students and I walked the halls of the school. They took turns pushing the coffee cart, greeting the teachers, and collecting the monies. They learned social skills. They received praise and recognition. It was amazing to watch these students grow in every way. I grew in every way. In the spring of 2003, my second marriage was dissolving, and by that summer, the divorce was final. I was numb. Thankful for my teaching career and the income it provided, I was able to purchase my own home right around the corner from the school and provide for my two children living there with me. My oldest was a student at MTSU, and because I was a teacher, he received a 25% discount on his tuition. I was grateful. In May of 2004, I began a journey with a man who sold my heart. He was tall enough and strong enough. He had been widowed. His heart had been broken. God gave us to each other. And 3 years later, on June 8, 2007, we were married. Happy anniversary. By that time, I was emotionally and mentally and physically exhausted. My new husband and I agreed it was time for me to relinquish my position as educator and help with the care of our newborn grandson. I was given the name Grammy by my stepdaughter Tia. Xavier became our world. By the time he was a toddler, the education I had received in my early childhood coursework here at Trevecca would become invaluable, and our upstairs bonus room became a preschool of sorts. One of the courses I had enjoyed the most was called play. I don't know if that was the technical term. People can't believe you have a course on play. Yes. But Chris Ward was phenomenal, and her spirit was there with me as I created this space for our grandson. I recalled the many tours to preschool facilities and kindergarten classrooms as I created centers. One for blocks, Brio train set and Lincoln logs. One for chalkboard with alphabet magnets. We had a little play kitchen, an area for puzzles, and a table for Play-Doh play. Our little lessons extended to the garden. We planted bulbs in the fall, watered transplants from his great-grandmother's garden in the spring, dug in the dirt, inspected growing things. We climbed the big weeping willow tree and threw rocks into the pond to watch the ripples. It was such a special time. In the fall of 2008, I was asked to be a presenter at TCC's Women's Ministries event, Getting Ready holidays. I shared how to create a welcoming entrance to your home at Christmas. It went well, in spite of a terrible, terrible case of nerves, and I think shingles after that. And when I returned to my seat, a beautiful, articulate woman leaned in behind me and whispered, "Have you ever been published?" Well, okay, this was my realm of experiences that I just kind of twirled around in my little world. And the idea of publishing anything was as far removed from this realm as if I walked out that door to my car, drove to the ocean, jumped into that ocean, and swam to Hawaii. Sweet Paige Collins, daughter of Jan Harvey, had planted a seed and she didn't even know it. The story I had shared during my presentation would later become the basis of my book for Christmas, Here We Go A Gathering. Here we go a gathering, fragrant boughs of cedar green with tiny nests tucked in between. Here we go a gathering, holly trees with berries red, branches trimmed above our heads. Here we go a gathering, magnolia limbs with giant leaves for placing in a Christmas wreath. Here we go a gathering, ivy with its trailing vines, tiny leaves that intertwine. Here we go a gathering, on buggies pulled by handsome mules with blankets, quilts, and picnic food. Stopping at a manger there, beasts of burden eating hay, thoughts of Jesus, Joseph, Mary. At that same event, 4 years later, I presented her with that book as a gift, as a thank you. In the winter of 2011, I ventured into the world of blogging by creating a blog called Grammy's House. It was a place to document my time with our grandson, all the stories and accompanying photos of our play, life as a grandmother. Feeling a sense of accomplishment at the creation of my blog, I felt a bit more confident in my ability to try something new. I had discovered Tasha Tinder, and I felt I had found a kindred spirit. Her story amazed me. Her books and illustrations, tiny note cards, her way of life, her cottage in New England, her gardens. I was enamored with her. She had passed away only a few years prior to me finding out about her. How had I lived all these almost 50 years without knowing her? She wore calico dresses and kerchiefs and wore her hair in braids and knitted cottage shawls. I wanted a knitted cottage shawl. I was going to have to learn how to knit. If I could write a blog, surely I could learn to knit. So I went to the internet, found a YouTube video or 2 or 3, and I learned to knit. Sitting in my big chair, knitting needles clicking, and sore red places all over my fingers from the worsted wool, I stopped and held up my work in progress for my husband's approval. He looked at me, he looked at the large triangle, looked back at me, and with a nod said, "I'm impressed." Well, I don't know when I had ever been so proud of myself. That was just the beginning. That's when I realized all the way deep down in my very being that if there was something I wanted to do badly enough, by golly, I could do it. And I knew all the way deep down in my very being that if I said, I think I'm going to look up how to build a rocket and fly it to the moon, that my husband would believe that I could do it. He's nodding. That Easter, I was given a mouse-making kit. Now that's a whole story in itself, and I will tell you that later. But that afternoon, full from eating Easter food, I was just too full to do much of anything else productive. I pulled out the coffee-dyed natural cotton batting, the felt that would be cut into mousy feet and ears, the tiny black glass beads that would become mousy eyes, soft pink embroidery floss for whiskers, and I brought this darling little mouse to life. I gave her the name Eliza, the name of She had been nicknamed Biddy. Well, this mouse was itty bitty, so that was that. She was Eliza. Because I'd always loved the Beatrix Potter stories and the images of tiny little mice in tiny little clothes, and because I loved all things Tasha Tudor, I concluded that this little stuffed toy mouse would have to have a knitted shawl and a kerchief as well. A ball of hand-spun wool, the color of mushrooms found deep in the woods, and a pair of tiny pink knitting needles were found in a basket. The basket had belonged to my husband's late wife, Nancy. It had been in the care of Xavier's mommy, Tia, my stepdaughter. She had come to realize she had no interest in learning to knit, and I had shared with her my feelings of regret in not saving my own mother's knitting needles. So with that in mind, she retrieved her mother's collection of needles from the basket, leaving me the stash of yarns and wool roving. She had welcomed my gift of a knitted Tasha Tudor-inspired cottage shawl made of the yarn her mother had hand-spun. On Easter Sunday, when I came upon the tiny pink needles hidden amongst the wool, they weren't much bigger than toothpicks, I decided to challenge myself and see if I could create a miniature version of the cottage shawl. Well, I did. The teeny tiny triangle was complete. I was so tickled with it, but wondered how I would keep it on the tiny mouse. Well, I went to my sewing basket. Inside there was a quantity of silk ribbon in the shade hydrangea. It was perfect. I attached two little links to two corners and tied the woolen shawl around the mouse's tummy. Now, a side note, Xavier had loved all these little vintage hankies that I always carried in my purse because they smell so good, Grammy, and they're so soft. We called them hankersniffs because in Beatrix Potter's Tale of Mrs. Tiggy Winkle, that's how she referred to them. So when he came down with a cold, Grammy's hankersniff was soothing to his very sore and runny little nose. He would blow and wipe, and I would launder over and over. And when the little handkerchief was returned again to him at bedtime, it wasn't long before he called me into the room to tell me it had ripped. It was in two pieces. So I tucked the tiny strip. There was a tiny strip and a big piece. I tucked the tiny strip into an old book I was reading and tucked the remainder into the sewing basket because I'm just sentimental that way. So back to the newly stitched mouse with her newly knitted shawl. I retrieved the strip of hankersniff and fashioned a tiny kerchief. She really was the most darling thing, but she needed a friend. So back to the sewing basket. John Jacob came to be. Now, John Jacob was the name of my great-great-grandfather, and he was named after my great-great-great-grandfather, so that was a great name. Okay, so they were a pair. The adventures ensued the minute 4-year-old Xavier came to Grammy's house. We acquired a cast iron car, a cottage door at the baseboard beneath the little tea table in the living room. There was little Scout, our 2-pound Yorkie, snatching up John Jacob and scurrying off. All this became material for my blog posts, and my husband was reading them. And my family started talking about me. Mother, she's talking to a mouse. Brad, have you talked to Christie because she is talking to a mouse? I really don't know. I don't know what this is. I'm kind of worried. But he was amused, and I thank God. In June, on our anniversary weekend, we made the move to a tiny Victorian cottage in downtown Franklin. It was a storybook cottage. Eliza and John Jacob moved to the butcher block counter in the kitchen, where Xavier could stand on a tiny stool and play with a pear. By now, there was a little cast iron black cook stove, a cast iron tub, a mailbox, a Christmas tree, tiny wooden chairs from Hobby Lobby, and tables made from wooden spools. There were tiny tea sets and tiny hutches. Eliza's abode was taking up the entire counter space. The adventures were sweet. This little boy loved her. loved John Jacob. He'd come over and he'd say, Grammy, so why is that in the women room or in the kitchen? So I don't know. She may be by the Christmas tree or in the pumpkins or I don't know. So we just had the best time. So the posts continued on the blog, and husband was entertained. He began suggesting the idea of a book. He thought I should write a book for children about all these adventures. I responded that I had absolutely no idea how to do that. I resisted, and he persisted. By August of 2011, I began to write it all down. How she came to be, the sequence of events and adventures, all that would eventually be the basis for a series of books about Eliza the mouse at Grandma's house. The journey began not only writing, but developing my own form of calligraphy for handwriting the books. I was also determined to improve my drawing skills. I'd done crafty teacher things, sketchy, nothing on purpose. It was my mother's suggestion that I use watercolors, as that medium seemed to suit the whimsy of the stories. Well, I had experienced total fail with watercolors at my last attempt. I had done acrylic paints in the 80s, everything made my country, heavy. So this was a journey, but I was determined. I showed up every morning at my little oak table in my makeshift studio in the sunroom of our little white cottage. I'd open the windows and listen to the birds. I would tune the radio station to classical music. The trickling fountain outside the open window was enchanting. The words flowed. The watercolors fascinated me, but I was struggling. I was sound asleep in bed one night. It was late winter of 2012, and I was awakened by a verse, a rhyme, circling around in my head. I knew if I didn't get up and write it down, it would be gone by morning. So I made my way to my little table, turned on the lamp, and began to write. Was ever there a sweeter fragrance? Was ever there a softer coo of doves or angels from a distance? I will vow I never knew. There it was on paper, something that was foreign to me. I didn't know how to write like this. I pulled out a 5x7 square of watercolor paper, and in pencil I wrote the verse. I drew a tiny Moses basket and a baby's face and arms and a tiny quilt covering the infant. I dipped my brush into the cup of water and blended the soft shades of the paints. Palest pink for the baby's cheeks, soft blues and greens and yellows for the quilt. I traced the words of the verse and the outline of the watercolor with my rapidograph pen with the tiniest tip. And there it was, the thing that was bigger than me, bigger than what I was able to do on my own. And it was as clear to me as if God had written in the night sky at 2:30 in the morning, you show up here every single day. If you keep showing up and keep picking up that pencil and that brush, we'll do this together. And I was reminded, he does not call the equipped, he equips the called. I dug deep. I worked even harder. I was determined, and I acknowledged my partnership with my master, the Creator. I was his instrument. By spring of 2012, I had created 4 stories with accompanying illustrations. I had been encouraged by a local publisher and an independent bookseller that they were unique and old-fashioned and old-school like Beatrix Potter. They suggested self-publishing through Lightning Source, a print-on-demand affiliate of Ingram Publishers. It was my husband's idea to self-publish under Rosewater Cottage Press, as we had named our 1900 Victorian Rosewater Cottage. It seemed fitting. He established it as an LLC. He researched online and found a formatter designer, and we scanned the pages of text and illustrations and sent them to her through Dropbox. I didn't know what that was. Everything, you don't see a you just send everything by email. She completed the formatting and returned the file ready for the printers. We were given an account representative at Lightning Source who was available for any questions or concerns, but don't ask to see them in person because they don't see anybody in person. The 4 books were printed and delivered to our home. One of the books was a mouse making guide, and I created 50 kits to accompany those first 50 guides. I also created a line of greeting cards, 2 lines of miniature note cards, and an Eliza-themed recipe card set, because she had learned how to bake in one of the stories on the little black cook stove. I launched Rosewater Cottage Press and the books and kits and cards at the Strawberry Patch barn sale, in a hay barn, in the middle of an open field, in the middle of nowhere, it seemed, in Hartsville, Tennessee. I mean, we pulled up and there were cows, and there was no one, and I said, what are we doing here? There's no one's going to come here. They converged. It was incredible. Some people would say, you have to start at the bottom, and I would respond, or sometimes you have to start in the barn. There were many naysayers along the way, as there always are. There are those who say, you should do it this way, or you can't do it like that, or if you'll go to this convention, or expo, or class, or do you really want to even do that? I was too busy writing and drawing and painting and learning and working. I didn't have time to do things the conventional way, or the way somebody else thought I should do things. Inspiration was pouring into me. I couldn't turn it off. I felt a sense of urgency that I had trouble explaining. I was 50 years old, and I felt I didn't have the luxury of getting everything in place, perfecting my drawing and painting and writing. If I had waited till it was all perfect, I would have never taken the leap. I just had to do it. Now I look back at those first 10 books I published within a year's time, and I think, should I go back and redo them? And then I hear my mother's words, Christie, women will follow your example. They'll see you were brave and jumped in. They'll be encouraged to begin their own dream if they know they don't have to be perfect in order to begin. There was even a literary agent that we consulted in the very early stages who thought my story would sell, but recommended I find someone else to illustrate, which almost crushed me, to which my husband looked me directly in the eye, because apparently that's the only way you can get to me is if you look me directly in the eye. He said, you keep doing what you're doing. Every illustration gets better and better. Don't you stop. I thank God for him every day, and I thank God for those who didn't believe I could do it, for that was the very thing that drove me to work harder, to not give up, to grow, to push the boundaries, to keep at it as long as the doors were opening, and they continue to open. One thing I've learned along the way is that those of us who are creative can find ourselves chasing rabbits. We're easily distracted. And this is why I read this to you today, because it is impossible for me to maintain a complete thought. On several occasions, I lost focus, and I thought I needed to pursue other opportunities, branch out into merchandise or other crafts, even a line of clothing. I mean, it was getting crazy. I had a very dear friend, a successful singer-songwriter, tell me that it was crucial for me to stay focused on becoming established as an author-illustrator. He said, everything else will come after that. Well, Rachel Ashwell, the creator of the shabby chic aesthetic, she affirmed that suggestion as well during her workshop I attended last spring in Texas, in Round Top. I am forever grateful for the wisdom of those two. I have just self-published my 13th book. 12 of the books I have self-published, and one has been published by Vineyard Stories, who published Susan Branch's book, A Fine Romance. There seems to be quite a trend, a shift, as more and more authors are choosing self-publishing. Susan Branch was with Little Brown and Company for years. They produced her first 12 books. And when they released her from her contract, because they said, times are changing, and she was devastated. She sought the help of an independent publisher for her 13th book. And after that, she established herself and has just self-published her 14th and 15th books consecutively. And for the first time, she's on the New York Times bestseller list. So I found one of the benefits of self-publishing through Lightning Source is that all books printed are included in Ingram Publishers' catalogs, and they're available in online stores internationally. I've been fortunate to have followers across the United States, as well as Sweden and England, Wales, Australia, Canada, and Africa. And it has been incredible that those fans of Eliza the Mouse are able to purchase my books globally. There have been so many who have commented, all your dreams are coming true. But in fact, I never dreamed of being an author. I never knew how to dream this big. My husband saw something in me. He saw my potential, my gift. Sometimes it takes the encouragement of a loved one or a friend to see that thing, that gift that we can't see or we're afraid to acknowledge. This hasn't been an easy road. There have been interruptions and changes in our family dynamic, which included our granddaughter coming to live with us 3.5 years ago when she had just turned 2. My brother remarked, "You could have come up with 1,000 reasons to stop, to put it all away and quit, but you keep going." When I see little girls, and often little boys, come to me beaming, telling me how much they loved reading one of my books, or tell me how much they love my little mouse, or when I hear mothers or grandmothers expressing their appreciation for stories with substance that teach concepts and include vocabulary that challenges, when I see a photograph of a young girl in Sierra Leone, Africa, with Eliza will not be afraid, I'm moved. When you find that thing that you have to do, that you can't not do, that is when you will know you have found your bliss, your passion, and to work diligently at that thing is joy. And when you determine that you will allow God to use you to have access to the talents and gifts that He created in you, that is when you will realize success, true success, not riches or fame. For if I was sitting here with $1 million in my bank account, I couldn't be happier or more at peace. So go, seek Him first, and all these things will be added unto you. The puzzle will come together. All the pieces matter. Cherish all the pieces.
If you take some questions,
I would love
do you have a question?
I know Miss Sarah had asked, she said, you remind me of Tasha Tudor, and I said I actually got to go to her home in Vermont. We traveled there fall of 2014 and stood over her table where her paints and her brushes, we just wept. It was like standing on holy ground to think someone who had been such an inspiration to me, and to see her things, and to see her rose water perfume on her bathroom counter, and that's what I wear. I just thought, and my husband said, this all makes sense. Her. Because she would have looms inside her living room. She had whatever she decided she wanted to try, she got it, and she tried it, and she did it. And it was that same, that kindred spirit of wow, I feel like I woke up and I found all these things that were there that I had never tapped into. I didn't know you could do. It's just amazing.
Is writing easier as you go?
Oh, it comes in. People say, what do you do when you get writer's block? I don't know what that is. I just really don't. Or like, how do you turn it off? That is my question. I have things that come, rhymes come, and somebody had to ask me, does the story come first, or do the illustrations, the thoughts of the images? And when I was reading this, the Christmas book, that rhyme started coming in the middle of the night. When I wrote it all down, I got it in 30 minutes, it was written. And then I looked back and I'm like, oh shoot, I'm gonna have to illustrate mules, and I don't know how to draw the backside of a mule. But there it is, and it, whatever I would write, it pushed me and challenged me to think outside the box. I mean, even now in this book that I'm working on, the 14th book, Eliza Visits the Ballet. We went to New York City and attended the Nutcracker. And so I was having to, how do I draw a tutu? How do I draw these little mice that are white? I mean, how do I paint that? They're white. And I had to, skills. So it's a constant growing. This came to me, and I get up in the night, it's as much a surprise to me as it may be to y'all that this stuff comes out. I don't know where it came from, but he has given it. But I sat there and I was writing this little rhyme. It's like, this is the house that Jack built. And it was about our little cottage of white. Because I thought, I was sitting there one night and all these little things, and it starts coming into a rhyme. And so I wrote it, and I sat there and I got tickled in the night. It was like, do we have time? Okay. This is the door. My husband teases me that we bought the door because, we bought the door. We bought the house because of the door, because it had a little twisty bell thing ringing on it. He said, so really, Christy, we're paying this amount for that door, and then this amount for the rest of the house. Yes.
I told him we'd give him $300,000 for the door.
So it's a great twisty bell. It sounds like we had one on Aunt Mildred's house in Kentucky, so it was a childhood memory. So this is the door, age 104, with a bell that rings right, attached to this cottage of white. This is the table, so tall and so slender, with 3 legs, not 4, carved just like the door, age 104, with a bell that rings right, attached to this cottage of white. This is the pediment hung high over the doorway, resembling a gable, carved just like the table, so tall and so slender, with 3 legs, not 4, carved like the door, age 104, with a bell that rings right, attached to this cottage of white. This is the mirror up o'er the mantle that rests on the mantle, reflecting the sunshine in all of our merriment, carved just like the pediment, hung high o'er the doorway, resembling a gable, carved just like the table, so tall and so slender, with 3 legs, not 4, carved just like the door, age 104, with a bell that rings right, attached to this cottage of white. This is the fire that this is the fire that crackles and pops. Its sound is so calming, it draws us all nearer, and glows neath the mirror that rests on the mantle, reflecting the sunshine in all of our merriment, carved just like the pediment, hung high o'er the doorway, resembling a gable. This is the clock, tick-tock, tick-tock, of that rhythm so soothing we shan't ever tire. As we sit by the fire that crackles and pops, its sound is so calming, it draws us all nearer and glows neath the mirror that rests on the mantle, reflecting the sunshine in all of our merriment. This is the singer, a treadle machine. Its clackety-clackety makes sewing a dream. As we hear the clock ticking of that rhythm so soothing, we shan't ever tire. As we sit by the fire that crackles and pops, its sound is so calming, it draws us all nearer. This is where I got tickled. This is the chamber stick holding a candle. The beeswax will drip, not a drop on your finger, as you sew on your singer. A treadle machine with its clackety-clackety, sewing's a dream. As we hear the clock ticking of that rhythm so soothing, we shan't ever tire. This is the rocker made of white wicker. It creaks as the baby's rocked. Shh, we must whisper, while the chamber stick's candle of beeswax will flicker, not dripping a drop as you sew on your singer. A treadle machine with its clackety-clackety, sewing's a dream. Chippy white chairs sit round the farm table, where pie and hot coffee hear soft conversation. Weathered and worn like the old wicker rocker, it wiggles and wobbles as you set down the bottle, and baby will sleep as you blow out the candle of beeswax, a flickering you sway past the table with 3 legs, not 4, beneath the white pediment high o'er the doorway. Then onto the door with the bell that rings right, turning the key for protection this night. Now it is time to put babe to bed, the soft pillow plumped and fluffed neath her head, cover so soft tucked under her chin, and prayers for sweet dreams we'll offer again, bidding good night from our cottage of white. So I sat on the beach in Martha's Vineyard and read this to my publisher there. She said, I don't get it. I'm not impressed. And I'm like, I'm crying. Michelle's crying. And she said, I never liked those machines. They're old. Those machines. It's not contemporary. She said, you need to stick with just writing children's books. That's not a children's book. And people are going to be confused. And of course, I have not listened to her one iota. And when I went to Rachel Ashwell's out in Texas, and her marketing director says, you need to publish that book. That's the entire, she wants my book. And I just think, do what he puts on your heart. Don't let persnicketies tell you you can't. You just can.
Is this what we call them now, the persnickety?
Yes, I like that new word, perusal and persnickety. The P word.
I don't know the other word.
Well, that too, so we're here, sister.
Thank you for reading that. That was great.
Well, thank you.
We also have some Victorian lavender cookies.
Well, let me brag on you.
Well, that's good.
She called. I have this recipe in the back of one of the books, and she said this Victorian lavender cookies with rosewater icing. Where do you get? So when I told her, I said, well, I don't know. I'd gotten everything online. She's researched and found and acquired the culinary lavender,
Yes.
the rosewater, and she made the cookies.
And there is Eliza goes to
Eliza celebrates a royal wedding.
celebrates the royal wedding.
Yes.
So try one. And my oldest daughter, I'll just say, she spit it out.
You
My husband liked it.
you have to
The
think.
rose water was something. I mean, it's a different flavor.
It really is. You have
It's very good.
prepare your palate
Yes.
for that. That
But
it's
it's
going to be
actual
different.
lavender. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.